This is the story of a man who came dangerously close to stealing $18 million, and for a while it looked like he might just succeed. His name was Allan. At the time, he was about 28 years old, living in Los Angeles and working at an armored facility. Every single day, he was surrounded by mountains of cash moving in and out of the depot. Now, here's the thing. Allan wasn't just any worker. He was someone who desperately wanted to be rich, and when you combine that desire with constant access to millions of dollars, it was only a matter of time before he thought about taking some for himself. And sure enough, in 1997, he came up with a daring idea. Why not rob the very company that employed him? From that point on, Allan started preparing. He studied the building's blueprints, memorized where the security cameras were placed, and figured out how to breach the vault. It's even said that he brought a camera into work, pretending to take casual snapshots of coworkers, when really he was photographing the inside of the building to map it out. But Allan knew something important. He couldn't pull off a heist of this size alone, so he recruited 5 of his friends to help. The planning wasn't high-tech. In fact, one of their strategy meetings happened in a parking lot where Allan drew the entire layout of the depot on the pavement with chalk, showing each guy where to enter. Low budget or not, the plan was set. With a date chosen, Allan kept working at the depot as if everything was normal. He got up every day, went to his shifts, and acted like nothing was going on behind the scenes. But just as the heist date was getting close, something unexpected happened. Allan was fired. The reason? Supposedly, he pulled a prank on a coworker involving a company vehicle. Whether that's exactly true or not doesn't matter. What matters is that his job was gone, and suddenly, so was his official access. The worst part? His plan relied heavily on using his set of company keys. Normally, a fired employee would have to turn their keys in immediately, but Allan wasn't ready to give up. Instead, he kept the keys just a little longer and moved the heist forward, telling his crew, "We're doing this tomorrow." So the next day, the group put their plan into motion. First, they attended a big house party in Long Beach. They mingled, laughed, made sure to be seen, establishing an alibi. Then, one by one, they slipped out. They changed into black clothes, pulled ski masks over their faces, grabbed their weapons, and climbed into a U-Haul truck they had rented for the job. Once they reached the depot, Allan used his still-active key to unlock the building. He had timed everything perfectly so they'd strike during the employees' meal break, when nearly everyone was gathered in the cafeteria. Allan and his crew stormed in, yelling for everyone to stay down. They ordered employees onto the floor and bound their hands and feet with duct tape. Then Allan located the supervisor, forced him to hand over his keys, and used them to open the main vault. Inside was nearly $19 million in cash. The crew stuffed the U-Haul full of money, an amount that, adjusted for today's value, would be nearly $38 million. Before leaving, they smashed the security cameras and stole the tapes to cover their tracks. In less than half an hour, they had pulled off the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. But Allan wasn't finished. To complete the illusion, the crew went back to an apartment, changed into normal clothes, and returned to the same Long Beach party, blending back in as if they'd never left. Meanwhile, back at the depot, employees eventually freed themselves and called the police. Investigators quickly suspected this had to be an inside job. The robbers knew too much about the building and the routines. And one employee even thought Allan's voice sounded familiar during the robbery. Naturally, the police started watching him, but Allan and his crew were careful. They didn't start throwing money around or making obvious purchases. Instead, they waited. For 6 months, they barely touched the money, letting the heat die down. When they finally did start spending, they did it smartly. They bought foreclosed houses and rented them out. They bought used cars with cash. They even set up fake businesses to launder the money. For a bunch of first-time criminals, their methods were surprisingly sophisticated. Months turned into years, and it looked like they might just get away with it. 2 years after the heist, each man had his share, and no one had been arrested. The police had suspicions, but no concrete evidence. And then it all came crashing down because of one stupid mistake. And one of the accomplices was purchasing property as part of his laundering scheme. He paid in cash, but one of the stacks of bills still had its original wrapper on it, boldly marked with the words, "Dunbar Armored." That was the very depot they had robbed. The real estate agent spotted it, called the authorities, and just like that, the whole operation began to unravel. The careless accomplice was arrested first, and under pressure, he gave up everyone else. Soon after, Allan and the rest of the gang were taken into custody. Allan was sentenced to 24 years in prison. One of his closest partners got 17 years, while the others each received between 8 and 10 years. $18 million gone. A plan that almost worked, and in the end, it all fell apart because of one overlooked paper band.